Hello everybody and welcome back to the Ultimate Fashion History with me, Amanda Hallay. And in tonight's show we're going to be looking at Marilyn at home.
Before we begin, just to remind you that I don't do comments here on YouTube, so head over to the Ultimate Fashion History Facebook group. I'll leave a link, as we're always running wild over there. And this episode comes to you in association with my favourite place on the planet, the Museo de la Moda in Santiago, Chile. It's the most beautiful place in the world, housed in the former family home of the museum's director, my good friend Jorge. This exquisite mid-century modern building, in its own glorious park, is home to the most amazing permanent collection of historic and iconic garments. And its conservation and care of historic clothing is remarkable and state-of-the-art, and since about 2019 I have been lucky enough to work for the Museo de la Moda as a writer and consultant, and it makes me so incredibly proud to play just a tiny part in such a magnificent enterprise. In 2016, the museum held an incredibly popular exhibition of the movie costumes, personal wardrobe, homeware and personal effects of Marilyn Monroe, all of which live and are cared for beautifully in the museum's permanent collection. And when I told Jorge I was planning to do this episode, he and his team kindly furnished me with photographs and footage of the exhibition to use in this episode. So most of what you'll be seeing here is from the Museo de la Moda, and I'll leave a link to the museum, of course, as well as from various auction sites, archival photo sites, that sort of thing. So why Marilyn and why now? Well, of course, it's 2022, which marks the 60th anniversary of Marilyn's passing, and we're heading for a season full of cinema's sensationalized sex symbol. Netflix recently aired its documentary, The Mystery of Marilyn Monroe, The Unheard Tapes, which I caught the other day and found incredibly compelling. Later in the year, and again on Netflix, Blonde is set to debut, starring Ana de Armas as Marilyn in what is described as a fictional chronicle of the life of Marilyn Monroe, so that should be interesting. We've just had the big hoo-ha over Kim Kardashian wearing Marilyn's Jean-Louis gown to the Met Gala, or Ripley's Believe It or Not really shouldn't have loaned this dress out. And I have an episode on that dress in the series That Dress. I'll leave a link in case you'd like to see it. And on August 5th, which was the day that the world got the news that Marilyn Monroe had died, I'm scheduled to give a streaming lecture at the One Day University, Marilyn Monroe, the 60-Year Itch, which will talk about Marilyn's life after death, if you will. I'll leave a link to that as well. So Marilyn is everywhere, but then again, she always has been. But it seems that this year, the focus is predominantly on her death, which is understandable. It's the 60th anniversary after all. And her death is still veiled in mystery. Was it an accident? Was it suicide? Or, as some people truly maintain, was it something else? And to be honest with you, sometimes I find it hard to think of Marilyn Monroe without thinking of her death. In fact, the last time I was in Los Angeles, I was with the Museo de la Moda, Jorge and his wonderful team from the MDLM, and we took a trip to Marilyn's final home, her house in Brentwood, where she took her last breath, 12305 Fifth Helena Drive, a lovely, but not at all flashy, neighborhood in Los Angeles. And although we couldn't see much, it has a very high wall. It's a private dwelling after all. It was a really strange experience, and perhaps because of the address, a song immediately came into my head which I could not get out for the rest of the day. A song called Norma Jean Baker, written by Serge Gainsbourg for Jane Birkin, and it sort of goes like this. Norma Jean Baker, 12305, Norma Jean Baker, 5th Helena Drive. And then it goes on. Norma Jean Baker, nu en diagonale. Norma Jean Baker, 5 en imbutol. It's a beautiful but really eerie song because it's just about her death. I'll leave a link to it in the description. And yes, I do have an episode on the sartorial stylings of Serge Gainsbourg and Jane Birkin. I'll leave a link to that too. But anyway, back to Marilyn. On the 60th anniversary of her awful, tragic passing, I guess it's understandable that the focus seems to be not only on her death, but on what seems to be the ever-decreasing spiral of the last couple of years of her life. Fire comedy Something's Got to Give because of lateness and non-attendance. Her ill-conceived relationship with the Kennedy brothers, Jack and Bobby, which left her feeling, by her own account, used and passed around and worthless and humiliated. Her increasing dependency on barbiturates, sleeping pills, Nembutol, all of which she'd mixed with her beloved champagne, and these final couple of years almost read like a woman with a death wish, don't they? But there's another way to look at Marilyn's final years and months. For the first time in a long time, she was absolutely single, which, although she said she didn't much care for, I think that it surely gave her a sense of self and independence to not have to take anybody else's emotional temperature on a daily basis, and to put herself first and foremost, front and center in all things, including how and where she lived. In many ways, Marilyn in her 30s had truly come of age, and I feel exuded a confidence in and a comfort with many areas of her life. Her personal wardrobe, her home, her own aesthetic tastes, and her growing intellectual curiosity. And it is that Marilyn that I want to talk about in this episode, which is why I'm calling it Marilyn at Home, because I'm not going to talk only about her actual home, that house on Helena Drive, but Marilyn at home in her own skin. At least I think she was in many ways, if not all. So let's start with her physical home. It was very different to the sort of homes she shared with her final husband Arthur Miller. He favoured rambling New England colonial houses that he could fix up, and they even rented a windmill for a while. But Marilyn was a modernist, which is why she asked Frank Lloyd Wright to design a house for the couple. And here's a sketch of the unbuilt house, and here's an architectural model of the house, and it is a triumph of mid-century modernism, isn't it? In the international modern style, with curves and light and windows, sleek and minimalist, and perfectly reflective of Marilyn's approach to her personal wardrobe in her final years, as we'll see in a second. Just 6 months before her death, she bought her very first house, this pretty hacienda-style house in Brentwood. Not a Beverly Hills mansion, but a truly lovely suburban house with a leafy, verdant garden. She described her new home in a letter to Arthur Miller's dad, with whom she stayed on wonderful terms. She described it as a small house with a big, big swimming pool. And she loved it and was so proud of it, so proud of owning her own home. She was 35 years old and had never owned a home of her own, not with a husband, but as a single, independent woman. It cost about $50,000, which is about $400,000 in today's money, although of course not what the house is worth today, which is worth about $10 million, I read. And Marilyn paid half in cash and took out a mortgage for the rest. And here is the actual legal document for the purchase of the property. And I read that when Marilyn signed it, she actually cried, because she couldn't believe that she, Marilyn Monroe, the most famous woman in the world, could possibly own a home of her own. And what a lovely home it was. Here are some shots of the interior, not in Marilyn's day, of course, but from when the house last went on the market, I guess. And you can see what an airy, sunny Californian home it is, with high-beamed ceilings, all those windows opening out onto the garden and the pool. And although, of course, it has been refurbished many times since Marilyn lived there, there are still touches of the star right there in the house. Like these Mexican tiles around the fireplace. Marilyn chose them and bought them herself, probably on a trip to Mexico, a trip she took with the intention of buying homeware furniture and fittings for her new home, like this beautiful handcrafted bench with scalloped waves, and here it is in situ, and Marilyn lived there beneath quite a buffet-esque modernist painting, and it's stacked with books and newspapers. I spot the New York Times there. Marilyn really liked to stay well informed. She also purchased these amazing folding chairs, which came in a set of 4, with these fabulous cushions in that mid-century colour wave of saturated pastels. Oh, be still my heart. And here they are again, in situ in Marilyn's home, with that gorgeous tiled coffee table and mid-century rattan chair. Marilyn effortlessly blending that streamlined mid-century aesthetic with traditional Mexican touches to stay in keeping with the house's architecture. And I think this speaks to her really quite sophisticated talent for blending styles, as well as her innate and very strong aesthetic taste and sensibilities. We'll look at more of Marilyn's furniture and homeware in a bit when we walk through the incredible exhibition at the Museo de la Moda. Now let's take a look at Marilyn's personal style in the final couple of years of her life, as I believe that Marilyn, in her 30s, truly reached her personal pinnacle of sartorial self-expression that spoke to her root personality as a woman who was in equal measure playful and pragmatic, and who loved to be comfortable. And also, and this is very difficult for us to get our heads around today, but Marilyn at 35 or 36 was considered to be at the start of middle age. I know, right? But in the early 1960s, middle age came an awful lot earlier. Life expectancy in the US in 1962 was an awfully young 69. So this is a Marilyn who at the very least was considered mature. And it is this Marilyn, in terms of style and many other things, that is my personal favourite Marilyn. She was starting to be given more mature roles, moving away from the ingenue and sex kitten roles. For example, in Something Has Got to Give, she plays a mother, not a mother to a baby, but a mother to 2 strapping kids. Although I think to many, Marilyn will always be the 1950s starlet in the wiggle dresses. Iconic Marilyn with the short, stiff poodle curls, the Marilyn that Warhol would immortalize on silk screen. This is the Marilyn of the 7-year itch, the young, breathy, wide-eyed ingenue, the sex kitten. I think of all of this as Americana Marilyn, if that makes sense. And of course she looked sensational, but to my eye, her true and I think deeper beauty emerged to its fullest later on. I mean, if we look at the scant footage that survives from Something's Got to Give, including these hair and makeup tests, then all I can say is, wow. In my opinion, Marilyn was at her very most beautiful here. There was a softness to her face. She was luminescent. And in terms of her relationship to fashion, her personal wardrobe during this era is my absolute favorite. I really think she found a signature style that worked for her every single day. And you can really see the evolution of Marilyn's approach to fashion by comparing these 2 pictures. There she is getting off a plane in 1954, and she is dressed as a movie star with a fur-lined coat and gloves. And although most women in the Kennedy era would still have boarded a plane dressed up in this type of attire in gloves and skirts and girdles, Marilyn didn't. Here she is at Miami Airport in 1962 getting onto a plane, and look at the transformation. She's so casual, she's minimalist, she's comfortable, she's wearing pants, these wonderful white ankle-length tapered pants from Jack's, teamed with a poochy blouse and cat eye shades. She is the epitome of early 60s leisure wear, and in the early 1960s, this was the look that Marilyn adopted in her personal life, and I love it. Really, there are 2 Marilyns, aren't there? as fashion changed and Marilyn matured. In that wonderful series of photographs taken by George Barris shortly before her death, we see just how relaxed her look really was, as in this iconic ensemble in orange, again with those fabulously tapered ankle-length pants, and a simple boat-neck sweater in silk jersey. The pants are by Jack's, which means that they are a perfect example of Jack's slacks, beloved of every woman in the era, although they were actually quite expensive. And the silk jersey top is by Pucci, and this ensemble lives in the permanent collection of the Museo della Moda. Back to Emilio Pucci. The second Marilyn discovered Pucci, she fell in love with his dresses and blouses, and here are just some of her Pucci dresses and tops on display. And what I think is interesting is that we all associate Pucci with those wild, swirling, and I'd say proto-psychedelic prints, yet there are very few prints to be found here. And look how many neutrals you're seeing here as well, browns and beiges and burnt sienna. Certainly Marilyn owned and enjoyed quite a few Pucci prints, but it was the simplicity of solids that appealed to her the most. These simple dresses in bold, solid colours, these beautiful silk jersey blouses that just hung from her body so perfectly. Her very favourite dress was this green Pucci with a boat neck collar in silk jersey. In fact, this is a dress that her maid Eunice recommended that she wear for her funeral. Why? Because it was Marilyn's favourite. And her clothing from Jack's could be machine washed and pressed very easily. And take a look at all of those neutral and muted shades that the movie star so loved. I really feel that at this point in her life, in terms of her personal wardrobe, Marilyn had perfected a pared-down, simplified look that was casual and sporty and unbelievably Californian. And as regular viewers of the channel will know, Kennedy-era casual wear is a personal favourite fashion moment of mine, and I would have loved to have owned every stitch of Marilyn's personal wardrobe. In a larger size, of course. Okay, let's take a tour of the beautiful Marilyn exhibition at the Museo della Moda, and I'll focus on her personal effects, books, homeware, and that at-home wardrobe, which was so beautifully curated by the museum. You will just love it. The exhibition featured some of Marilyn's sleepwear, like these beautiful silk robes and pajamas. This is comfy stuff. Not really sex kitten lingerie, but this was for comfort. Jorge has collected fan letters sent to Marilyn from the people of Chile. I think that's such a lovely thing to do. Here are some of Marilyn's kitchenware, some of her homeware. Look at that beautiful modernist vase. And I think that's the painting that we saw earlier when we were looking at that Mexican bench. Her homeware really was a lovely combination of traditional with modern. Look at those doorknobs there, hand-painted with little animals. I absolutely love them. Here are some of her books. Look at that collection of Proust. She really was a smart cookie. There is The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison, her copy. And here are just some of those incredible, beautiful, simple, minimalist Pucci silk jersey dresses. Look at those colors. When I first saw this lovely footage of the exhibition from the museum, I gave a little gasp when I saw that Marilyn used Erno Laszlo skincare. Why? Come into my bathroom. Because I use Erno Laszlo skincare too. I seem to have a lot more of it than Marilyn did, but then again, I need a lot more of it than Marilyn did. And here is what seems to be Marilyn's endless collection of elegant, simple little black cocktail dresses. Now, of course, there was an awful lot more in the exhibition than I'm showing you here. A lot of it was from her screen persona, movie costumes, scripts, things like that, and from her personal wardrobe, stuff from the 50s. But of course, I wanted to focus on Marilyn at home in the 60s. Wasn't that a beautiful exhibition? And I'm so glad that so much of Marilyn's stuff ended up in proper museums where it's loved and cared for, and not at Ripley's, believe it or not. Enough said about all that. Anyway, it's my birthday this weekend, and I have never lived in a world in which Marilyn Monroe was alive. Yet I knew who she was as a tiny, tiny child. And because I was 7, Marilyn seemed old. And it is sobering and really sad to think that this weekend I will have lived 21 years more than Marilyn did. Gosh, she was so young when she died, and I feel that, her inner demons and heartbreak notwithstanding, she was really just starting. What might have Marilyn done had she lived? Yes, Hollywood was changing, but I truly believe that Marilyn would have stayed in step with these changes and adapted to them. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love Anne Bancroft's performance in The Graduate, but had she lived, I think Marilyn would have made a terrific and hilariously funny Mrs. Robinson. She'd have been 40, after all, 5 years older than Anne Bancroft when she took the role, and I think she would have been delightful. Equally, I can imagine Marilyn finally being allowed to truly get her teeth into some very serious acting, and I can see her slaying in those gritty John Cassavetes-type movies. With her incredible interest in acting and filmmaking itself, I can see Marilyn stepping behind the camera. She already had her own production company, after all. Oh, and I'd have loved to have seen her vision as a director, but most of all, I am sure that, had she lived, she'd eventually have adopted children because, as we all know, the one role that she desperately wanted but never got was the role of mother. On this 60th anniversary of her passing, let's remember Marilyn alive. I don't think any of us will ever really know the real Marilyn Monroe. I think she was a whole lot of different people rolled into one. And I would have loved to have been friends with every one of them.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode here on The Ultimate Fashion History with me, Amanda Hallay. You can get in touch with me through my website, amandahallay.com. I'll leave a link below. You know I always love to hear from you. Join The Ultimate Fashion History on Facebook. We always have fun over there. I'll leave a link to that as well. And if you haven't already, and if you like the cut of my jib, why not subscribe to the channel by clicking that little circle over there. I'll be back very soon with more on The Ultimate Fashion History. So until then, thank you ever so much for watching. Bye for now.